The remains of U.S. presidents, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and an FBI director are among the thousands to be interred here.
We'll explain these graves and more as we walk through the Congressional Cemetery. When Pierre L'Enfant planned out DC, he did not include cemeteries.
We have no idea why. So when people in DC were dying, people were burying them on their farms and their backyards, pretty much wherever they could. In response to that issue, a local group established what is now the Congressional Cemetery. And how pretty is this place? The first area we're going to started off as a good idea, but it actually ended up creeping congressmen out so much that they ultimately stopped adding to it.
Here are the Cenotaphs, which are monuments to people who were buried elsewhere.
But there are actual people who were buried here, 80 people in fact. These memorials were erected to honor the congressmen and senators who died while in office. We found Adams, well, his cenotaph anyway.
Adams had a stroke on the House floor, then died a few days later. Always a public servant till the day he died. I got a fun fact for you. John Adams was our first one-term president, and his son, John Quincy Adams, was our second one-term president. A family of one-term presidents.
More than what we can say.
Yeah.
The practice of erecting cenotaphs ended in 1870 because congressmen were getting creeped out by being reminded of all of their fellow colleagues who passed away. There's also lots of dogs here. Apparently this is the place to bring your dog. He's got the zoomies. Where's he going? he's gone, I guess. Now we're headed towards one of the most badass men who's buried here. I was not expecting his grave to be literally right up against the gatehouse, but here it is. Commodore Thomas Tingey served in the British Navy before immigrating to the North American colonies around the time of the American Revolution.
He eventually joined the U.S. Navy, and in 1800 he was appointed to lay out and command the new Washington Navy Yard. When the British invaded the capital in August of 1814, Tingey was the last officer to leave the city.
Before he left, he set his new navy yard on fire so that way the British could not take anything from it.
Afterwards, he later served on the board that established this cemetery.
This is why you go to cemeteries, because how else would you find out about people like him? Next is the only signer of the Declaration of Independence who is buried in DC.
Elbridge Gerry was elected as James Madison's second vice president in 1812 and served until his death.
Gerry was also a member of the Continental Congress, an ambassador to France, and a governor of Massachusetts.
I'm going to hit you with another fun fact. The political practice of gerrymandering is named after this guy.
Ah, that makes sense. We saw this guy at the same time. Thomas Stewart. What's up, Thomas? Oh, and Antoinette!
There's a man buried here who might just be one of the most controversial people in this cemetery.
J. Edgar Hoover was the first director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, otherwise known as the FBI.
But he was born and raised right here in DC. He even earned his law degree at George Washington University. The FBI donated this wrought iron fence and bench.
And apparently they bring new FBI agents here to visit Hoover's grave. I really want to know the story behind bringing new FBI agents to see Hoover. Like, what is that supposed to do?
There's another notable Washingtonian here whose work is one of the things that makes DC so iconic.
Dr. William Thornton won the competition to design the U.S. Capitol in 1793. He also designed the Octagon House in DC as well as Tudor Place. If that wasn't enough, Thornton was a physician, an amateur architect, a novelist, a writer, and a painter.
Wow, he was a true Renaissance man.
He was, and he gets his own little spot under this beautiful tree.
Now, all of the people we've discussed were wealthy,
but anyone could be placed into the public vault, regardless of how rich or poor they were. The public vault was built by Congress to hold the remains of people until further arrangements could be made for them to be buried elsewhere.
Our friend John Quincy Adams was temporarily here, as well as President William Henry Harrison.
The sad thing about William Henry Harrison is his body was here for almost 3 months, which is more than double the time he was president. Okay, shout out to Congressional Cemetery for having these little pamphlets, because this is basically what we've been working off of for this whole tour, and I'm so glad we decided to come here because there are amazing people buried here that I never really would have heard of otherwise.
To me, the most fascinating thing were the cenotaphs. I had no idea those existed here, and I also thought the story of why they stopped adding them is really interesting.
Yeah, I guess that's what happens when everyone in Congress is old.
Yeah.
And we hope that you learned something along the way. And as always, thanks for watching.
Bye. It's wrought iron fence and bench. Okay. Elbridge Gerry was a... That's exactly what I was going to say. All right.